Hey YouTube, Velociraptor for you, aka Alex Consalvos here again, and welcome to yet another episode of my show, Misunderstood Movies, where I talk about movies that I've seen that have been branded as bad by others, but in my opinion are either good or have some redeeming qualities to them that truly make them enjoyable experiences to watch. And if it wasn't obvious to tell already, I am a huge Jurassic Park fan. The 1993 film adaptation by Steven Spielberg of the Michael Crichton novel of the same name is currently celebrating its landmark 25th anniversary this year, and it has a fourth sequel coming out real soon. So as my way of celebrating, today I'm going to be taking a look at one of the sequels of Jurassic Park that I personally feel is truly underrated. I'm talking about Jurassic Park 3. Now, the third entry in the Jurassic Park franchise has a pretty interesting history behind it, so before I discuss the plot and then my personal thoughts about the criticisms leveled at the film and my personal feelings afterwards, what I'm going to do right now is discuss a little of the history of Jurassic Park 3, and it all goes back to the first Jurassic Park back in 1993. At the time of the first film's release, it was already a given that a sequel was going to be released, and it was only because of fan pressure that Michael Crichton was pressured into writing the Lost World novel. Now, Steven Spielberg was in talks to direct the sequel, which he eventually accepted, but also I found out, thanks to videos on YouTube, that at the time, Spielberg's close friend director Joe Johnston, who has a background in special effects and is the director of films such as The Rocketeer, Jumanji, and the last film I reviewed, The Pagemaster, Joe Johnston wanted to direct the Lost World Jurassic Park, but since Spielberg was locked into the directorial duties of the film at the time, he told Johnston that he would direct The Lost World, but if there was ever going to be a sequel to that, then Joe Johnston could have the directing job. So, when The Lost World Jurassic Park proved to be yet another financial hit for Universal Studios, a sequel was announced by the middle of the year 1999, and Joe Johnston got the directing job. Now, the script for Jurassic Park 3, I learned, went through a pretty interesting period of development, even before the start of actual production, and even during production. At the time, the first idea that popped into the head of Steven Spielberg for the third Jurassic Park around 1999 was the idea that Alan Grant, played by Sam Neill, would go back to Isla Sorna, which was the island that was the former site of InGen's Jurassic Park dinosaur cloning operations, and he would be living in a tree a la Robinson Crusoe and studying the dinosaurs there. But Joe Johnston didn't want to go with that idea because in interviews he said that he personally felt that there wouldn't be a reason for Alan Grant to go back to the islands and do that following what happened to him in the first film. Now, the first official script for Jurassic Park 3 was penned right around the year 2000, the start of the new millennium. The first script would have involved Alan Grant and his colleague in the third Jurassic Park film, Billy Brennan, accompanying a rich man and his teenage son, plus a beautiful naturalist and a military guy, to Costa Rica and eventually to Isla Sorna, because during this story there would be mysterious animal attacks on people going on in Costa Rica, and when Alan and his team would go to Isla Sorna, they would eventually find out that the culprits were pteranodons that escaped from the island and were now wreaking havoc on Isla Sorna. Now, Joe Johnston was stated that there was nothing wrong with this particular script, but he felt that it would be too complicated. And ironically, he said the same thing about the other script that was penned after this one was rejected. Now, in the second script written for Jurassic Park 3, it would have involved two airplanes, one full of parents of children and the other plane full of the children themselves, who would be on a vacation to the Galapagos Islands. However, the plane carrying the kids would be diverted off course from the Galapagos and then crash on Isla Sorna, and the story would revolve around the parents trying to rescue their kids off of the island, and also of the kids trying to survive the genetically engineered prehistoric animals that inhabit the island. Now, again, Joe Johnston said that there wasn't anything wrong with the script at all, but apparently there was, because he again said that this was too complicated for him. And apparently this script is the script that actually had sets built, props developed, effects teams locked in, everything ready to go into production. However, that script would be tossed out a mere 5 weeks before production officially began. Now, when trying to salvage what they had as far as to create the story for the third film, Joe Johnston looked to David Koepp, who was the screenwriter of both The Lost World Jurassic Park and the original Jurassic Park. Although David Koepp didn't write another script, he did suggest to Joe Johnston and the screenwriters who were brought on board for the final script, Alexander Payne and Peter Buchman, that they make the story leaner, faster, and more even-paced. And David suggested to them that the story revolve around a rescue mission of one person stranded on Isla Sorna. And because they had a release date locked in, and every effects department with their effects ready to be filmed, they really had to work around what they had. So what Joe Johnston and the scriptwriters eventually did was they looked at the other scripts that Joe had rejected and decided to craft the story from there out of the pieces. So now you're probably wondering, what was the story that was bursting onto the big screen in 2001? Well, I'm about to tell you. Now, the story of Jurassic Park 3 begins in a similar way to The Lost World Jurassic Park, with a wide opening shot of Isla Sorna, aka Site B. It's here where we're introduced to our first main character, Trevor Morgan's Eric Kirby, at the time 13-year-old boy who is on an illegal parasailing trip off the coast of the island with his mom's new boyfriend Ben Hildebrand, played by, pulling up IMDb here, Mark Herlick. So while on this excursion, the party that they have chartered to take them off the coast of the island for this parasailing trip gets attacked and killed by a mysterious unseen predator, forcing Ben and Eric to disengage from the boat before it crashes and parasail all the way into the island interior. It's here where the scene shifts once again to Dr. Alan Grant, played by Sam Neill, and former paleobotanist Dr. Ellie Sattler, played by Laura Dern. We see that they have actually split up as a couple, and she is happily married with children of her own to a man named Mark. He is, got IMDb here, played by Taylor Nichols. So, during dinner over at Ellie's house, Mark leaves Dr. Grant and Ellie to catch up on old times. We find out that Dr. Grant has firmly returned to his roots as a paleontologist who continues to study dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals as the extinct animals that they originally were, and that he has zero interest whatsoever in the genetically engineered prehistoric creatures that InGen created following his previous experience during the first film. During this dinner scene, he discusses with Ellie that he's still continuing his research on raptors, aka dromaeosaurids, and according to his latest findings, when they scanned a fossil skull, they discovered what looks to be a pretty sophisticated resonating chamber, that both of these scientists agree on was the key to the raptors' social hierarchy, their communication, and their intelligence. The next day, Dr. Grant is at a local university giving a lecture on his findings in an effort to raise funds to continue his research. However, everyone at the college, students and faculty alike, are apparently more interested in his experience on Isla Nublar in 1993, now that the world has been made aware of what InGen was doing thanks to the San Diego incident in the Lost World during 1997. However, Dr. Grant firmly establishes his stance on InGen, and he ends his lecture at the college saying that no force on heaven or earth could get me to that island. When he returns to his Montana dig site later on during the film, we are then introduced to his colleague, Billy Brennan, played by Alessandro Navolo. It's here that Billy uses a 3D printer, what he calls a rapid prototyper, to sculpt a perfect replica of a velociraptor's resonating chamber, and he blows in it like a musical instrument to show Alan how exactly raptors would have communicated. He is impressed, Dr. Grant of course, but then they get interrupted by a man named Paul Kirby, played by William H. Macy, who claims to be a wealthy businessman who invites Alan and Billy to dinner with him and his wife later on that evening, and it's Billy who accepts the invitation. Both of them go to a Western-themed restaurant, and they have dinner with Paul and his wife Amanda, played by Tay Leone. They tell Billy and Alan that they are, as I said, a wealthy couple who claim to have been to anywhere and everywhere on this green earth, and for their wedding anniversary they're planning an aerial tour of Isla Sorna, and they wish for Alan Grant to be their guide, given the fact that he is one of the few people who has seen living, breathing Mesozoic animals in the flesh and lived to tell about it. And what ultimately convinces Dr. Grant to accompany the Kirbys on this trip, just like the last time, it's the money that Paul supposedly offers Alan in exchange for being their guide. So, they accompany the Kirbys as well as 3 mercenaries that the Kirbys have hired to accompany them. Their names are Nash, Udesky, and Cooper. They arrive at Isla Sorna, and at first, the aerial tour seems to be going as planned, with Dr. Grant attempting to educate the party about the dinosaurs that they're seeing as they fly over the island. But when they have intention to land on the island, Dr. Grant immediately and understandably is concerned, but before he can attempt to stop the plane from landing, he's knocked out unconscious by Cooper from behind. So the next thing he knows, when he wakes up, they've landed. The mercenaries are going off into the jungles of the island to set up a safety perimeter, and Amanda is screaming into a bullhorn at the top of her lungs the names Ben and Eric. But Dr. Grant sees this as a surefire way of attracting dinosaurs to their position. So he tells Paul to get her to stop, but when she asks, "What's a bad idea?" they're interrupted by a loud roar coming from the jungle. Billy asks if it's from a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but given the sound of it, Dr. Grant disagrees. It's from a much bigger carnivorous dinosaur. And the presence of this creature, even before it arrives in the flesh for all of us to see, is made apparent when 2 of the mercenaries, Udesky and Nash, immediately race back to the plane and tell everyone to get on board, and they attempt to fly off, but they leave Cooper behind. Cooper himself runs out onto the runway in an attempt to stop the plane, but he is quickly snapped up and devoured by the creature that attacked him and the others. This creature collides with the plane, causing it to crash into the canopy of a large tree. This same creature then proceeds to attack the plane further. It kills Nash, and then it causes the plane to fall from the tree, and it proceeds to attack the party further in an attempt to eat them. Now, what's this creature I'm talking about? It's a Spinosaurus aegyptigus. When Dr. Grant and the survivors escape the plane, the Spinosaurus gives chase, and for a moment it seems like the party have lost the giant predator, but then they encounter a T-Rex, a subadult male to be exact, which chases them back to the Spinosaurus. What ensues is a fight between the two prehistoric predators that ends with the Spino claiming victory by snapping the T-Rex's neck. And right after this harrowing escape, it's here that Dr. Grant demands to know what is really up with the Kirbys. What is going on here? So, the Kirbys finally spill the beans. They're not a wealthy couple at all. They don't have the money to pay Dr. Grant and Billy for their research, and the real reason they did what they did, they essentially kidnapped him because that kid from the beginning, Eric, is their son. And because Dr. Grant was one of the few people who survived John Hammond's Jurassic Park and lived to tell about it, they ultimately kidnapped him, thinking that he could help them find their son. During their trek through the island, they come across the parasail that Ben and Eric were in that they used to escape from the boat, and they find the dead skeleton of Ben, which freaks Amanda out, which causes her to run right into a colony of nests. And when Paul, having ran after Amanda to calm her down, when Paul calls Dr. Grant and Billy and Udesky, the other surviving mercenary, over to the colony of nests, Grant, upon seeing them, just utters one word: raptor. Later, they come across a long-abandoned InGen laboratory. And once they're inside, they take a tour of the laboratory, and it's here where the remains of what InGen was doing in preparation for John Hammond's failed theme park is on full display for all the audience to see. Then Amanda happens upon one tank that has a fully formed velociraptor head in it. But the raptor inside, it's not inside. It's outside. It's tricking Amanda, and it immediately attacks the others. After escaping this raptor inside the laboratory, the raptor barks and it calls on the rest of its pack to give chase to the humans. It chases them right in the middle of a herd of duck-billed hadrosaurs, Corythosaurus and Parasaurolophus specifically. And during this stampede of herbivores, the party gets separated. Udesky gets killed by the raptors as part of a trap that they set up to capture the rest of the humans. Dr. Grant is separated from them, but he gets rescued from the pack of creatures by Eric Kirby, who has survived an astonishing 8 weeks all by himself on this island, which earns Dr. Grant his utmost respect. The next morning, Dr. Grant and Eric soon suddenly hear Paul Kirby's satellite phone ringing from somewhere in the jungle. The next thing you know, it leads to both of them coming closer and closer to where Billy and the Kirbys are. And the next thing you know, the Kirbys and Dr. Grant and Eric and Billy are reunited together at last at a old fence that's spanning the length of this valley across the island. Of course, the Kirbys are overjoyed to see their son alive and well on the island, and Eric tells them that he found them because he heard the jingle of Paul's phone. But Paul realizes that he doesn't have it, and that he loaned it to Nash right before the Spinosaurus ate him. So then when the phone starts ringing again, all of them look behind to see the Spinosaurus once again having snuck up on them, and it's ready to attack them. It gives chase, and Dr. Grant and Eric rush through the fence, and then all of them take shelter in what we later find out is an aviary that InGen constructed to house what? Well, we're going to find out now, aren't we? So once they escape the Spinosaurus again, Billy comes clean with Dr. Grant about a secret that he's been carrying that actually has put all of the party in danger. So when Dr. Grant opens up Billy's bag, what does he find? 2 raptor eggs. Dr. Grant is understandably upset at Billy for having made such a foolish decision, giving the raptors essentially a reason to chase them. Billy explains to Dr. Grant that the reason why they did was when they found out that the Kirby's are not who they seem and that their check is no good, he decided to take the raptor eggs as thinking that they would be worth a fortune enough to fund another paleontological dig for another decade. Dr. Grant is so upset, understandably, that he at first decides he wants to smash the raptor eggs, but nope. He realizes that even without the eggs, the raptors would still catch them. So now the tensions are running high, to say the least, at least among 2 members of the party. They make their way into the inner sanctum of the aviary, and it's here where they're attacked by a flock of pteranodons. Eric gets snatched by a full-grown adult and almost becomes food for its babies, but it's Billy, in an attempt to redeem himself from his mistake, that uses the parasail that they discovered earlier to save Eric. And it's him that makes the ultimate sacrifice, or so it seems. He separates himself from the parasail when he gets hooked on a cliff, but he is quickly set upon by the prehistoric flying reptiles, while the others use the river to swim under and out of the aviary and onto a boat that Dr. Grant and Eric discovered earlier. It's here where Dr. Grant and Eric have a pretty nice scene together, where Dr. Grant feels sorry about being so harsh on Billy earlier, and he now feels that he shouldn't have been so hard. He understands that Billy was just a young man, and then he compares the kind of person that Billy was, or so we all believe right now, to the person that he is. Billy, Dr. Grant says, was the kind of person who wanted to actually experience and be able to actually be in the presence of living dinosaurs, while Dr. Grant always found safety being among the fossilized bones of the animals. And he uses a astronomer-astronaut analogy while discussing this to Eric. And at the end of their conversation, as they're floating along the river, they enter a large valley inhabited by all manner of herbivorous dinosaurs. Brachiosaurus, Parasaurolophus, Stegosaurus, and Ankylosaurus. And it's a very nice scene that, once again, it captures the awe and majesty that these creatures instill upon audiences right from the very beginning of the first Jurassic Park film. So later on in the night, they once again hear Paul Kirby's phone, and they brace themselves for another Spinosaur attack, only to see that the ringing is coming from piles of Spinosaur dung. While Eric stays on the boat, the adults get off, and it's them who have to get down and dirty, literally, and they successfully retrieve the phone, only to then see that a Ceratosaurus is approaching them. It takes one whiff, but it's so put off by the scent of the Spinosaurus, it's like, no way, I'm gonna eat you, and it just turns off. So later on, they're back on the boat, once again cruising down Isla Sorna River, and a rainstorm pops up. Now, who does Dr. Grant call in an attempt to rescue them all off of the island? He calls Ellie Sattler's house. Now, which may seem ridiculous, but Mark, Ellie's new husband, makes it clear early in the film that he actually works for the U.S. State Department. Now, remember that. So, during this scene where Dr. Grant is calling for help, he successfully makes contact with Ellie's household, but he gets her young son Charlie. So the little kid, once he hears that's Grant's voice at the other end, agrees to take the phone to his mother, But back on Isla Sorna, guess who shows up for one last round? The Spinosaurus. While it attacks Dr. Grant and his party on the boat, we are treated to a nicely darkly humorous back and forth scene where we shift from the Spinosaur attacking the party on the island to Ellie's son Charlie watching Barney, of all things, on the TV at his house. But eventually he gives the phone to Ellie, and once she makes contact with Alan Grant, it's thanks to her son and the phone call itself that she realizes that Alan is once again on an island inhabited by dinosaurs. Back on the island, the Spinosaurus is about to make mincemeat out of Amanda and Eric and Dr. Grant, but it's Paul who successfully lures the giant theropod away from them using himself as bait. Grant manages to find a flare gun that was formerly left on the boat, and he uses it to ignite some fuel that was leaking out of it, causing a huge fire that scares the Spinosaurus away and ends its involvement in this movie once and for all. Now, the next day, the rain has passed, and as they're making their way towards the coast of the island, finally, the raptors catch up with the party. It's here that the humans give the raptors back their eggs with no further conflict, and thanks to the connections that Ellie's husband Mark has with the U.S. military, it's the U.S. military who rescues Dr. Grant and the Kirbys off of the island. And as a surprise, it turns out that while they were scouring the coast of the island, they found Billy, having been through a lot, having lost a lot of blood, but he is alive and he's reunited with Dr. Grant. As helicopters finally airlift the party away from the island once and for all, they discover to their surprise pteranodons flying around them. Eric asks Dr. Grant where he believes the creatures are going, and Dr. Grant assumes that they may be looking for a new nesting ground. And it's now where Paul declares that it's time for them all to go home. Their travels and their terrors that they experienced are over. And we're treated to a nice shot at the end of the film with the 3 pteranodons flying off into the sunset. And so ends Jurassic Park 3. Now, Jurassic Park 3, with a budget of around $93 million, proved to be yet another financial success for Universal Studios. It grossed around $50 million in its opening weekend here in the United States, and across the world, when you take that into account, it went on to gross a total of around $368 million. Now, critics and audiences alike, even with this being a Jurassic Park film, were pretty much split down the middle as far as this film goes. Major critics were divided on it. Some loved it, and some hate it, and some are right in the middle, even to this day. As for the Jurassic Park fan base, of which myself I identify as a member, it's the same thing. There are people who love Jurassic Park 3, people who hate it, and there are people who are right in the middle of it. So what exactly is it about Jurassic Park 3 that people say causes it to be quote-unquote inferior to the other 2 Jurassic Parks that came before it? Well, one flaw that I learned about that I respectfully disagree with, but others point out is a flaw of this third entry, comes down to the Kirbys as characters, specifically Paul and Amanda Kirby. Now, according to other reviews of Jurassic Park 3 that I have read and seen online, both Kirby parents come across as annoying and or stupid. And this may come as a shock to all of you, but I personally don't view the Kirby parents as stupid at all. Now, do they do some stupid things? You could argue that they do stupid things, like the scene where Amanda is screaming at the top of her lungs into a bullhorn. Oh yeah, did I mention that in this movie, Paul and Amanda are divorced, And it's through this whole experience that they go through on Isla Sorna in an effort to recover their kid that they learn how to be a couple again and appreciate each other. But going back to the two Kirby parents being one of, according to what others say is a flaw of this film, I personally, as I said, don't believe that these two characters in particular are badly written or badly acted characters. I've seen this movie many, many times, just to give you people an idea of how high I regard this film. William H. Macy, I feel, does a very good job at communicating an understandable parent's worry at what may happen to their child who is in this dangerous situation, who is missing for this period of time. The urgency you can sense in his voice when he tells Dr. Grant that it's imperative that they find their son and rescue him. And it's the same thing that I personally read off of Tay Leone's performance. Now, a lot of the people who dislike Jurassic Park 3 dislike, out of two Kirby parents, they dislike Amanda most of all. They say that she is mostly annoying, that she's screaming all the time, which granted, she does scream, but she doesn't scream all the time. The script allows Tay Leone's character to do more and say more than just scream at the top of her lungs all the time in the situations that her character is placed in. She screams in the beginning Spinosaurus attack. She screams when the dead skeleton of her boyfriend falls from the parasail right in front of her. Think about it. If a dead skeleton was thrust right into your face, how would you react? You'd be pretty scared and freaked out too, I'd imagine. I know I would. But it's not like Amanda Kirby just does that the whole time. She is the same kind of character that her divorced husband Paul Kirby is, a parent understandably concerned about her child's safety. This is what Paul and Amanda Kirby are. They are two parents who, despite the differences between them, what they do have in common is the love that they have for their son. The concern that they understandably have about him being in this incredibly dangerous situation is something that I feel any and all parent who watches this movie can relate to. The people who hate this movie cite that the reason why the Kirbys are stupid characters is because of the things that they do, with essentially tricking and kidnapping Dr. Alan Grant being among them. And you could argue that that is not the best way to go about getting help in an effort for you to rescue your son or your child in general from a dangerous situation, but to me, it makes sense and it's at least understandable why. And I personally can't help but sympathize with them a bit, even though I don't have kids of my own. But when you think about it from the standpoint of a parent who loves a child, it's completely, totally understandable why Paul and Amanda Kirby approach the situation the way they do. And you can read it on the facial expressions that William H. Macy and Tay Leone put on, the emotions that they emote. They're desperate. And when your child is in a situation like Eric Kirby has been for 8 weeks in this movie, that, as the parent, could actually, understandably, lead you to do some very desperate things and pull off some pretty desperate stunts in an attempt to make sure that your family is reunited. And another human character in this film that others have cited is another dull or stupid character that, again, I respectfully disagree with for the most part, is Alessandro Nivola's character of Billy Brennan. Now, to me, Billy Brennan almost kind of comes across as like an adult version of Tim Murphy from Jurassic Park and The Lost World Jurassic Park. Billy is, like Tim, highly enthusiastic about dinosaurs even though he's in his 20s, and the level of excitement that he shows in the scene when all of the party is en route to the island is one of the reasons why I say that he's almost like a mirror image of Tim Murphy. Now, people have said that Billy is a stupid character once again because of the things that he does. Now, think about it this way. If you found out that you were essentially tricked and kidnapped and that you aren't going to be financially compensated, once again, that would lead you to do something pretty drastic to compensate, if for nothing else than your own satisfaction, because you feel that you've been cheated. And this is what I believe leads Billy to steal the raptor eggs. Yes, and he clearly explains it in the movie. He took the raptor eggs thinking that both of them would be worth a fortune to fund another paleontological dig for him and Dr. Alan Grant. And he firmly acknowledges that what he did was a stupid decision, but he did have well-meaning intentions behind it. Or he believes that he had well-meaning intentions behind it. He was thinking about him and Dr. Alan Grant and continuing their research. So it's understandable why he did what he did. He did something pretty stupid that put all of them in danger, yes, and this is what I feel is the theme of this film. The other two films, and even the fourth film in the series, Jurassic World, which came out in 2015, which I will talk about later, had this long-running theme of what happens when man tampers with nature and the consequences that result from it. Jurassic Park 3 has a completely different theme, and from multiple viewings of it, the theme that I believe this film is trying to communicate to the audience that I can't help but feel was lost on a good chunk of the audience that saw it, critics and Jurassic Park fans and general filmgoers alike. I feel that its theme is the desperation of man, the situations that man finds himself in that leads him to pull off some drastic measures in order to accomplish certain goals. In my personal opinion, the way Alessandro Nivola, Tay Leone, and William H. Macy act, the way they emote, the way the script wrote and developed their characters is, even though it's within the confines of a short 90-minute running time, is enough to where I personally do get invested in these three characters. I identify the reasons why they do what they do. I understand their causes, their respective causes, and I, for one, can understand how the causes of these three characters serve the purpose of the story and help to move it along at the pace that it does. And I'm sure there are others out there who probably do share my opinion on the Kirby parents alone and Billy, and hey, I would love to hear your thoughts if your opinions on these three characters alone do align with mine. By all means, let me know in the comments down below. Regarding some of the dialogue spoken in this movie, like the previous two Jurassic Park films before it, this movie is not without its dry humorous moments. There's a scene where Dr. Grant, Paul, and Amanda Kirby, Udesky, they're trekking through the jungle, and the two Kirby parents are arguing with each other, with Amanda stating that Dr. Grant isn't looking for their son, he's looking for a means to escape, and Paul's response is to go, "Fine, go ahead and scream, and when that tricycloplot attacks you, don't come crying to me." That was, I feel, a really well-written, dry, humorous joke that is a really good trademark dry, humorous joke that people who watch these movies come to expect from them. Nothing more, nothing less. You may be wondering, what about Dr. Alan Grant, Alex? What are your thoughts and opinions on him in this movie? Well, I for one see that Sam Neill does once again a truly wonderful job of playing this character that we've come to love since 1993. When watching Jurassic Park 3, you can tell that Sam Neill really eased back into this role. Now, some of the characterizations, the new characterizations and changes put into Alan Grant this time around may throw some audiences off for a loop, but when I look at it, it's at least understandable. Having almost been eaten by dinosaurs the first time around, Dr. Grant understandably wanted to return to his roots. He wanted to return to an area, a place that he felt safe. And for him, that was the extinct fossilized animals. He wanted to completely distance himself from the living, breathing, genetically engineered dinosaurs that InGen had brought back to life. Throughout the course of this film, we can see that now Dr. Grant once again has a renewed appreciation for InGen's creations as the living, breathing animals, not monsters or vicious beasts, that they truly are. Speaking of how Dr. Grant changes as a character in this film, here's something all of you might find interesting. This is the Jurassic Park 3 official storybook. I've had it since the film came out back in 2001, and right at the very end, which may be a potential spoiler for those of you who haven't read this book, there's an interesting scene at the end of this book that I felt like sharing with all of you that I feel could at least explain why Dr. Grant goes through the character transformation that he does in this film. So, it happens at the very end, and it's an adaptation of the scene in which the party gets rescued off of the coast of Isla Sorna by the US military. Now, at the very end of this book, and I really do not know if the scene that I am about to read to you was in the final shooting script for the film, or if it was in one of the two rejected scripts before it, but anyway, the scene plays out like this. The co-pilot handed a radio headset to Dr. Grant. "It's for you." And it was Ellie that was at the other end of the radio. "Are you okay?" she asked. Dr. Grant smiled. "Yes, I'm fine. Thank goodness," Ellie says. He heard the relief in her voice. Then she said, "Alan, I thought you never wanted to go back to Jurassic Park. You said there was nothing for you to learn there." "I did say that, didn't I?" says Dr. Grant. "So what were you doing?" she asked. Dr. Grant watched the pteranodons as they flew toward the rising sun of a new day. "Evolving," he replied. This scene, in the storybook adaptation, I feel that is a truly well-written scene, even with as little words as what was put into it. And I, for one, would have liked to have seen this, because it really would have given the character arc that Dr. Grant has been going through between the first Jurassic Park and this film some closure. But for what we do see of him on screen in this time around, it does work, and once again, Sam Neill truly does pull off a very, very, very good performance. And the same can be said for, at the time, young Trevor Morgan and his role as Eric Kirby, the son of Paul and Amanda. Unlike Lex and Tim and Kelly Malcolm from The Lost World, Eric proves himself to be a truly intelligent and resourceful kid. When, even in the face of death, he really does not let that deter him from trying to survive on this island. He just figures out what he needs to do to survive, where he needs to take shelter, which will provide him with a food supply, which will provide him with a water supply, what can he use to defend himself from the predators. He does all of that all by himself, and it's through his resourcefulness and intelligence that he lasts for 8 weeks on Isla Sorna all by himself. And it kind of makes you wonder, well, was there really a need for them to go rescue him? Leave him there, he's doing just fine. Now, another major gripe about Jurassic Park 3 that many people have that I personally have only a little inconvenience with is a scene early on in the film, and it's during the scene where the party is flying towards Isla Sorna, and it's a dream sequence, the first of its kind to appear in a Jurassic Park film. The dream sequence is that Alan Grant wakes up to find everyone else on the plane gone, then he turns next to him to see a male velociraptor talking to him. It says, "Alan!" And then it's only just a dream because it's Billy who wakes him up. Now, this threw many people, understandably, for a loop, as no scene like that appeared in the predecessors. Now, I can understand why this scene threw many people for a loop, but I personally only have a little bit of a problem with it, which I will talk about later, but as a whole, I really don't find anything inherently wrong with this scene, really, because here is how I interpret this scene. Remember that, as far as paleontology goes, Dr. Grant's primary species of expertise, if you will, are the dromaeosaurids, the velociraptors. And, okay, so now the scene is starting to make even a little bit of sense, but what makes this scene make even all the more sense for me is the fact that, remember, Dr. Grant was almost killed by these creatures that he's been studying. The scene is an indicator that Dr. Grant is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD for short. Taken out of context, the scene looks goofy, but if you approach it from that way, this dream sequence really doesn't look goofy or out of place within the film at all. Now, you're probably wondering, Alex, what's your minor gripe with this scene? Well, it's really the fact that the raptor that's talking to Alan Grant is clearly a male velociraptor that he sees later on in the film, and not one of the raptors that he originally saw from the 1993 film. That is really the only area in the scene that needed fixing, I feel, but other than that, I get that scene. Now, the biggest gripe that many hardcore fellow Jurassic Park fans have with this film, I can sum up in one word: Spinosaurus. Specifically, I'm talking about the controversial fight scene between the Spinosaurus and the Tyrannosaurus Rex, in which the Spino violently emerges as the victor. Now, fellow Jurassic Park fans, please hear me out. I understand truly and honestly and genuinely why, to this day, a lot of you take major issue with the sequence. But you also have to understand, and this is for the general moviegoers out there as well, that the reason why the Spinosaurus is the big bad in this film, it has to do with executive producer Steven Spielberg, director Joe Johnston, and the Jurassic Park film's paleontological consultant, Dr. Jack Horner. Dr. Jack Horner is well known for his controversial theories on Tyrannosaurus Rex. As the paleontological consultant on all the Jurassic Park films, for the third film, Jack Horner was the one, I believe, who suggested to the film crew that a newer, bigger theropod replace the Tyrannosaurus Rex as the primary dinosaur antagonist to give the audiences something different, a brand new kind of dinosaur that the general public hasn't been aware of before. Because everyone knows Tyrannosaurus Rex, but not that many people knew what the heck Spinosaurus was during that time, so it at least seemed or sounded like a good judgment call on the part of Jack Horner and the director and the film crew to introduce this dinosaur into the film. And at the time, it was not that well known paleontologically of a dinosaur. When its remains were first discovered around 1913 from Morocco in Africa, during the onset of World War II, the German museum that the Spinosaurus remains were excavated from was destroyed. And for the longest time, all scientists had to go on, as far as information, were sketches of the fossils by the paleontologist who discovered it, Dr. Ernest Stromer. At the time that Jurassic Park 3 came out, as I said, very little paleontological evidence was discovered about Spinosaurus. Paleontologists at the time knew that it was a theropod, that it was a relative of the crocodile-snouted theropod from England known as Baryonyx, which, by the way, was almost in consideration for the main dinosaur antagonist role of Jurassic Park 3, even having an official logo created for it. But when the film crew and Jack Horner, from the notes about Spinosaurus that were there at the time, when they looked at them and when they saw that Ernest Stromer had speculated that Spinosaurus was an even bigger animal than Tyrannosaurus Rex, they made the decision to go with the Spinosaurus. They knew that it was, as I said, a theropod, that they assumed walked bipedally, they knew it had long arms, and they knew that it had a distinctive tall bony sail along its back that we now know served mostly as a display function for the real-life animal. So, as part of the marketing campaign of the film to drive home to audiences that a new dinosaur had existed during prehistoric times that was bigger than the T-Rex and that InGen had brought back to life and was ready to show the T-Rex who's boss, they really drove home that point to audiences that this Spinosaurus was bigger and meaner and nastier and more vicious and more stronger and more powerful than the T-Rex. That backfired. My gosh, did that not sit well with a majority of hardcore fellow Jurassic Park fans. Now, personally, yes, I was one of many who was taken in complete shock at that scene because for being one of the most famous dinosaurs ever discovered, to see T-Rex of all dinosaurs just killed like that, it threw me for a loop. But you know what? As time went on, I got over it. I, for one, did get over it, because I'm not just a Jurassic Park fan, I'm an overall dinosaur fan in general. So as I dug, pun intended, more into Spinosaurus, about the animal itself during my free time, as I educated myself more on this animal, that is what allowed me personally to get over my disappointment of seeing it defeat the T-Rex the way it did in the film. And there is a camp of people out there who do share my opinion on Spinosaurus as the animal that it was in real life. But I do understand that there is a camp of hardcore Jurassic Park fans out there who to this day still hate the Spinosaurus with a passion because they interpret its victory over the T-Rex in the film as understandably a slap to the face of the fan base for taking away the franchise's trademark dinosaur. But you have to remember, and I do want to stress this, at the time the film was made, not much was known about Spinosaurus. The Spinosaurus that appears in Jurassic Park 3 is a genetically engineered / modified, I want to say hybridized mutant variation of the real-life animal that it originally was, like all of InGen's cloned Mesozoic animals. The real-life Spinosaurus, thanks to an extensive study of it conducted by paleontologists in 2014, we now know was a quadrupedal theropod dinosaur. It still had the distinctive sail on its back. Its jaws, while long and crocodile-like, were not built to crush bone and rip into the flesh of other dinosaurs as it was portrayed in the film. The jaws of the real-life Spinosaurus were built more like the jaws of a modern-day gharial crocodile, long, thin, and perfectly equipped to catch large fish with these long cone-shaped sharp teeth. So, this animal, in real life, Even though it was indeed bigger than Tyrannosaurus rex that came after it, Spinosaurus is estimated to have been at least 50 feet in length, while the largest T-Rex ever discovered is estimated to be 42 feet in length. Even though Spinosaurus was in real life a bigger animal, it was not built like other traditional theropods. It was a theropod that was built unlike any others that came before or since during the Mesozoic era, and so it really wouldn't have been equipped to fight other typical theropods like T-Rex. And it's now well-known fact that T-Rex had the single strongest bite force of any theropod that came before or after it. In fact, no other theropod came after T-Rex because it was the culmination of 65 million years of giant carnivorous theropod, specifically Tyrannosaurid evolution, and given the way its jaws and its teeth were structured, if the real-life T-Rex would have met a real-life Spinosaurus, as we now know what these animals were to be in real life, the T-Rex would most likely kill the Spinosaurus. If that makes the JP fans out there who hate the Spinosaurus feel any better. And final point I want to make about that scene, the T-Rex that fought the Spinosaurus was a sub-adult. Had the T-Rex that fought the Spinosaurus been Rexy from Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, since she is a fully grown adult T-Rex, if she had fought the Spinosaurus, that would have been a different story. Most likely, she would have killed him. So to wrap this video up, this has been me just putting out my personal thoughts on Jurassic Park 3, my defenses of it, my defenses of the human characters, my defenses of certain scenes and certain creature characters that appear within it. So in order to wrap this up, to this day, I for one still don't know why a lot of other people out there, Jurassic Park fan or not, easily dismiss this. You go back and look at Jurassic Park 3, you can tell that a lot of genuine hard work, love, and passion went into this film, so I really feel it shouldn't be too easily dismissed. It is a known given that a group of Jurassic Park fans, myself included, do truly love Jurassic Park 3, and that really does bring a smile to my face, because I regard this film equally as good as The Lost World Jurassic Park and the first Jurassic Park. It's not better than the two films, it's equally as good, in my personal opinion at least. I'm not sure if anyone else out there feels the same way, but if you do, by all means, sound off. So, the fact that Jurassic Park 3 is loved by a sizable group of Jurassic Park fans really shouldn't be an understatement at all, because we all have different opinions and tastes when it comes to film. Well, this about wraps up another episode of Misunderstood Movies. I would like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to sit down and watch this video. Hopefully you at least understand why I personally feel the way I do about Jurassic Park 3, and if you feel the same way I do, by all means let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Heck, even if you feel the opposite of how I feel about this movie, by all means, leave a comment and open up. All I ask is a nice, peaceful, pleasant discussion. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this video overall, and if not learned anything, I hope you learned something, but even if you didn't learn something, hopefully you enjoyed watching this video, and I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe to me. Every bit of support you show to my channel would really make my day. So until next time, this is Velociraptor for you, aka Alex Consalvos, and I will see you all next time on the next Misunderstood Movies. Take care, everyone.